Hello everybody. This is a somewhat different video and I want to start this with a trigger warning. You have seen the title and yeah, we'll talk about death. And this is about something that happened recently, and I just want to make it clear that this may be a bit more difficult to talk about, and if you can't handle that or just don't want to deal with it right now or feel anxious about it or whatever, skip away and watch something else, one of my videos where I'm just angry and funny or something else. This is, I need to talk, and that's all it is right now, so don't feel bad for it. If you'd like to stay, I do appreciate that, and yeah, let's get this over with. It won't get any easier anyway, so cheers. All right. So, something happened last week, and it's been thrown me for a loop, to put it mildly. I'm careful with, words like trauma and shit like that, but it has certainly impacted me and has not left me, and I've been trying to think about my way out of it. It hasn't worked so far, so I figured since I don't have a therapist yet, this will have to do. And if you're watching this, thanks. I'll try to actually get to some points that I think are constructive, positive, even maybe at the end, but I still need to make my way through all of this. If you stay with me, this will be a rambly one and an unorganized one. So that's what we'll do, and I'll start by telling you, well, the story of what happened, and then we'll move on from there into all kinds of dark places. If you come with me, once again, I appreciate that. If you don't, no hard feelings. This shit isn't for everyone. It should be for no one, really. But, Alright, so, for those of you who don't know, which is hopefully almost all of you, I live here with a friend, my flatmate, and our flat does share a small hallway with one other flat, and the person living there has always been somewhat messy, heavy smoker, and, that hallway has always smelled really bad. It's like, in summer we just, leave the outside door open so to air it out and get some fresh air and stuff like that. That's the situation. It has been that situation ever since I moved here, which is now, 10 years ago. Yeah, I'm old. So, always been that way. Sometimes worse, sometimes not as bad, but it's always been that way. So, there's that, and I've had very, very little interaction with the person living there, with the neighbor, because, bit of a loner, bit of a weird guy, obviously with, like, their own kind of problems. To put it mildly, they had a social worker dropping in, or, looking in at them from time to time, I guess roughly, like, every week, maybe 2 weeks, something like that. And, we'd meet from time to time. Someone, rang at the wrong door, or stuff like that. You meet on the stairs, like when I go to the gym, or whatever, and that's about it, because, you don't vibe with everybody. That's the point. So, that's the situation. Has been like that ever since I moved here, for, like, the last 10 years, basically. So, yeah, when over the holidays, I went to visit family, and I visited friends over New Year's, and yeah, obviously that hallway smelled bad, like, even, on the upper level of what we've, encountered there before, and it progressively got worse, and we tried to, ring the door and talk to the guy. It's like, yeah, I'm socially awkward. I try to avoid every form of conflict. I know it's unbelievable when you see me rage about stuff on the internet, but, like, in person, I try to avoid every form of conflict. I'm really, really bad with conflict. Unless I'm, really angry about something, then I start yelling at people. I'm just not good with my emotions, I guess, and avoid conflict and stuff like that as much as possible. So, obviously, I avoided, ringing the door as long as possible, because you don't want to talk to someone who's like, hey, look, your place stinks really bad. You need to do something about that. That kind of confrontation is something I'd rather avoid. We did so for a long time, but it got worse and worse. And when we finally, started to actually try to contact the guy, no answer. So we did call the cops, and yeah, they showed up. They're like, "Yep, this smells bad," and they also tried to get into the place, and they didn't get into the place. And then they, got someone to open the door, and they did go in. And yes, it's exactly what you think it is. My neighbor had passed away several weeks ago, and no one noticed until we called the cops on that. Now that is a situation that you never imagined would happen in your life, which is sort of where the problems start with. That was last Monday, right after I finished recording the weekly navel gazing video. So be glad that one came out and I didn't talk about it back then. So yeah, that's that's the thing. I've tried to deal with the fact ever since, because there's so many things coming together. There's like having a bad conscience about stuff, feeling bad, blaming myself for stuff, feeling blamed by the universe, stuff like that goes into that, and it starts you thinking about mortality and shit like that as well. And that's what I want to talk through and see where we can go with this, because I do believe that talking helps. On the other hand, reading helps, and watching movies can help. Art can help us come to grips with the universe. That's kind of the point of art, in my way. I think so, and that's sort of what I want to look at here in some detail. And I'll try to sprinkle in some things about books and stuff, but not that much. So yeah, obviously, that kind of stuff hits hard. Also, just on a purely physical level, it really, like, you read a lot of fantasy like me, you always like, yeah, the stench of a battlefield and stuff. Like, if you haven't smelled that, be glad you haven't. It's really bad, really bad. And of course, opening the door and having police search the entire apartment and trying to figure out what happened and stuff like that did lead to that smell a lot. So just like the sheer physicalness of it is something that is important here as well, I feel. And yeah, I certainly will read those kind of scenes very differently from now on, I feel. And that's whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know yet. I'm kind of glad that the book that I just reread was The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, and the scene in the Dead Marshes is very much not about the stench. It's just like about the images of dead bodies. But still, it's like something like that happens every time you hear about death, and books like fantasy, death is everywhere. Or is it? And that's one of the parts that I want to go to later on here, because I think that's partly where the key to my issues right now lies. So the first part is obviously about the police state, because of course I need to go there, right? See, we obviously called the police, so they had to interview us and talk to us. And that's a very interesting thing. It's like, just by the police officers being, part of the state, part of, the power, you feel like you're accused. Well, at least I do. Now, that might just be because I have a generally, adversarial view of the world when it comes to, police and stuff like that. That might just be part of it, but it's still like someone in a uniform starts asking you questions that you suddenly feel like you're blamed for something. I think this is really important to understand, because I have done nothing here. Well, that's be very clear. I've done nothing here, but you feel like that, and I think it's important to understand that when you have these ideas like the innocent have nothing to fear from the law, but you fear nevertheless. And I think that was just like really scary for me to realize that level of that power of fear that members of the police, and presumably also soldiers, if I ever meet any in a formal situation, have on you. Now that might be exaggerated, because as I said, I'm very much non-confrontative, and interactions with people that hold power are by nature somewhat confrontative in a way. So that was one part, just feeling like they are blaming me for what happened. It's because they obviously asked when did you see the guy the last time, and are you sure about that? And it's their job, and I totally get it. But it also is, when you come to these kind of questions, it's very, very difficult, right? Our memories are much less clear for the most part than we might think. And it's like, yeah, when did I see the guy the last time? Before the holidays, I'm sure of that. But beyond that, sometime in December, I assume. But was it, the 20th or was it the 10th? Or somewhere in between? It's like, I don't know. Because obviously, you don't look on the calendar and mark down that, yes, you left the house and you heard like music playing from there, probably from like your neighbor's place. You don't do that. So you feel like you're not measuring up to something. That not measuring up part, I think, is a huge issue here. We'll get there. Don't worry. This is part of the issue, right? You feel like you're being judged because of that, or at least I do. And I am already like constantly guilt-ridden about like everything. Like I always feel like I'm not measuring up to things, stuff that I should do and haven't done. And the bad part is that there's a lot of stuff out there that I should have done earlier and haven't done and stuff like that. So there's things where I'm justified to feel guilty. A lot of them. I wish I could just change all of that. But it also means that things that I should not feel, judged upon, they slip in very, very easily, and that's part of the issue. So it feels like for me like not measuring up, and it was interesting for me just to realize how much the just by them being part of the state, part of the organization of this country, how much I felt pressured and feared, and that's interesting because like look, I'm as privileged as they come, like. Well, I could probably have like short hair. That would probably help, and a more trimmed beard. But beyond that, I'm a white cis het dude with I know how to talk. I'm certainly sort of well educated. I'm good. And while being blind is certainly a disability, in certain ways it does also confer some additional privileges. Like people will probably not judge me as harsh as they would someone without that disability. Which is a part of the problem, of a different problem. But even for me, in that situation, that fear was there. So I can't even begin to imagine how it must feel for someone who is, less privileged in that regard. Someone who looks non-white. Someone who is, less privileged, I guess, is my point here. So that was interesting on its own. But there's more, and I want to come back to that judging thing. Because see, there is a larger expectation out there, and that's sort of what I'm wrestling with, and that is, yes, we should have done something. We read stories about something like that, people, passing away, no one noticing for ages. We read or hear those kind of stories on a regular basis, and usually the narrative is that society has gotten worse with modernity and individualism, and people are no longer caring for anyone. And yeah, it is sad in a way that no one cares. And I totally understand that. But this narrative also means like if something like that happens, society has failed. In this case, the people around that person, the neighbors, have failed in their role, in their like expected role of being good members of society, of a human society. And that's hard to shake for me at least. Like on a rational level, I'm like, yeah, there's nothing I could have done, right? There's very little interaction. Yes, we could have called the cops much earlier. That's certainly something we could have done. But that would not help, in any way. Yeah, it might have been, dead for like 2 weeks instead of 3 or whatever, But the fundamental facts is something I could not have changed unless I had been in the room while it happened, able to call, an ambulance. And even then, So why is there this expectation, and what does it come from? And I think that's where a lot of this like feeling of, I don't know, lacking or not measuring up kind of thing comes from. And cops, asking just like average regular questions just personifies and makes that very concrete, that more abstract fear of like not measuring up to society's expectations, which, something that I guess we all struggle with. Because as much as, I personally like, yeah, fuck society's expectations. Like, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, that's what I say. But deep down, it's a constant struggle to not care about the expectations of others. And sometimes I'm better at it, and sometimes I'm not so good at it. So there's that, but that constant expectation of failing as members of society, and not necessarily on the more like structural elements of society, the more mechanized economic parts of society, is like, having a job with a living wage, earning money, not costing anyone else money. Those parts are, societal expectations. And I'm more comfortable with not measuring up to those. But this part goes down to like the core element of being human, of, caring for other people. It's about fellowship in a way, like respect and fellowship in a way. It's like, but is there such a duty? Do I, in a contemporary modern society, have the moral duty to, care for other people that I don't know? Like, that's weird. And I feel there's a narrative behind that is, well, it's very conservative. It's like, yeah, life was better when we lived in small families and everyone lived together. And yeah, maybe there is something to that, but that's not the society we live in, and we can never return to that. There will always be people who are alone. I'm certainly one. Yeah, I live with a friend right now, but beyond that, I'm fairly alone. There's people who are even more alone. We interact on the internet with other people that are probably maybe also alone. And that's fine. We have moved off, like, beyond the idea of just being, friends are only the people that we meet in real life out here. Even the term like real life is already ridiculous. Like, the internet is real. That's the point, right? So that narrative, that narrative like, oh, society has failed. Well, yes, it has, in a way. Because no one should just, die and no one notices. Apart from just like the legal elements and, the health risk and all of that stuff. It feels bad. And that, I think, is where this moves in a way. It's like, this stuff will happen. And it's bad because it also, apart from, showing us that we have failed as a society, or presumably failed as a society, which, once again, I'm not quite sure that's true, it also brings something home and drives something home, and that is death. See, in the West, we have moved death as far away and as possible from our existence, from our reality, from our lived reality. And I think that's, in a way, that's comfortable, certainly. I'm personally very happy with that. It's like, old age is moved away from us. Like, the older people get in a lot of situations, they'll go to like a retirement home, or even, more intensive care, depending on how people grow older and how they become more and more less and less capable of just like looking after themselves. But we move them away, spatially away, emotionally away, in a way. And death is ritualized and curated in similar ways. We have all these rituals, but beyond that, we don't talk about death. And something like this does not conform. It does not conform to that curated clinical view of death that we have. Large tragedies have the same thing, right? Like airplane crashes, stuff like that. War, certainly also, but, war is ritualized in a different way. And I think that's just a coping strategy for us as humans to encompass that, because death and mortality are very, very difficult to come to terms with. And something like this does not conform, and it sticks out. It sticks out. It breaks that illusion that death doesn't happen, or happens only far away, or something like that, right? That's what makes this stick out so much, and makes this so hard to deal with, in a way. So we try to find, like we always do when we find something that doesn't conform to how our world works, we try to find someone to blame. In this case, we're blaming, people who are not looking after other people. It's like, yeah, but it's not my duty. Was it the social worker's duty? I don't know. Even that person should have, holidays off, and probably would have come this week if this hadn't happened. You know what I mean? So who knows? And I think that's part of the issue. Is like, this brings home that death is a reality, and one that we still know very little about. Yes, we know about, decomposition of bodies and stuff like that. the biologic, we know about the mechanics, but we seriously wish, and I think that's where spirituality and stuff like that comes in. It's like we're faced with the fact that we can explain almost everything in our human existence on a mechanical level, but really deep down, most of us wish that there was something more, that our self is not just a machine. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm just like a machine. No, there's no free will. I know how the machine works. But do you really believe that that's all? Like, deep down in your heart, do you? Now, look, I'm not religious, right? Like, that's not the point. My point is that these forms of death and stuff like that bring that question to the front. We're like, so did the machine just run out and no one cares? Like, if I, left, my lamp burning and then just went on holidays, and at some point the light bulb just blows, and who cares? Or is there more? And that's a question that, so, we have no answer to that. We still have no answer to that. So we try to avoid it by pushing it away and, putting it into all these kinds of narratives where we're like, yeah, it's just the circle of life and stuff like that. But stories like this, events like this, just tear that like careful veil we've built around how we view life in a way, and that's pretty brutal, and does make me struggle in a lot of ways, because I'm like, yeah, I could not have done anything, but I still feel bad, and that's not good. Because the question here is distance, right? The question is distance. There's emotional distance and there's physical distance. And I don't mean distance as like in large, I mean it as just a measurement of proximity. And that's I think is the vital thing, because we're confusing those two. Physically, my neighbor's flat is 10 meters away. Well, not even that, like more like 3 meters through that wall, basically. Physically, that's very close. Emotionally, that's not very close. And physical and emotional proximity used to be much more similar in the past. But with telecommunication, the internet, and so forth, emotional proximity, emotional distance, and physical proximity are no longer, congruent. They're different. I feel much closer to people who live on the other end of the planet than I feel to people living next door. And it will probably take a while for us as humans to adapt to that, like on a more like intuitive level, but that's the reality we're living with. And I think that's a bit where the anger also comes in, because of course I get angry, me. But it's like, I blame myself for what happened, and I see that narrative of society blaming myself for what happened, just by like, isn't it sad that someone died alone? It's like, yeah, that's probably sad. But wasn't it more sad that that they lived alone? That's definitely part of it. Like every time someone's like, oh, that's sad, I feel like, yeah. I feel that unspoken, like, shouldn't you have talked to the guy before? And I'm like, no, not necessarily. Because emotional distance or proximity and physical distance and proximity are no longer the same. So I get angry at society for expecting me to do something. At the same time, I do still feel bad for someone, living their life alone and having no interactions around here, or possibly anywhere else, because, yes, we need to look after each other. We need to look after the people that are emotionally close to us. And if, I talk to someone on the internet every day and then suddenly they are basically gone, I'd worry and I'd try to find out what happened. But apparently that also didn't happen until we called the cops on the situation. And that's the sad part here. That's the sadness here, I think. So yeah. Now, the really bad part is that a lot of this is not a rational thing. It's an irrational thing. It's an emotional thing. And those are obviously triggered in a lot of ways. And I looked at, literature, and I'm like, how many books have I read that actually deal with death in that form, in like just happening as a random thing and the aftermath? And most don't. Like, as I said, I read a lot of fantasy, and fantasy books are full of death. They're full of violence and corpses and stuff like that. But that's still ritualized. Like, someone dies and that's that, and they're gone. Maybe you get like a burial scene. Like, That's it. There's a funeral. We repeat those parts, at least in fantasy. But it's very difficult to find fantasy books that just deal with the sheer enormity or incomprehensibility of, someone just no longer being there. And I wish there was more because, as I said, like art helps us wrestle with the troubles of reality. That's its job, and I wish there was more. And I think that's sort of like the thing, because I started talking about like the smell. That smell is still there. I don't know if it's just in my mind at this point or if it's actually there. I mean, I know it's actually there because no cleaning company has yet come and actually cleaned the apartment. So yeah, I know, but I'm like, will it still be there from now on, always, or at least show up in like weird moments and like bam, and then it's suddenly there and you're back in that situation, and that whole like complex of feeling inadequate to the expectations of society, feeling pressured, feeling under suspicion by the law, by the machine, by the system out there. Will all of that just snap back? And if so, for how long? I know that sounds really bad, and in a lot of ways, and I feel like probably I'll get over all of it because I'm okay, I guess. Maybe I'm not. And that once again drove home just like how random events are. It's like, I didn't do anything, it just happened. And now I'm stuck with it. And that just, I don't know, drives me insane. So that's mostly what I wanted to talk about today. Is like, I don't know, be careful to each other, but know who you should care for. Know the people that are actually close to you emotionally. And if those are also spatially, physically close to you, it's even better, I guess, in a lot of ways. But don't confuse those two. The people that you care for are the people that you decide to care for, and that's a human thing that we have. We should decide who to care for, and then we should do that with all our hearts and all our capabilities. But we should not let anyone else decide that for us, and that's something that I'm trying to learn right now. Anyway, that's my rambles for today. Sorry this was a bit dark, but I had to get it off my chest, and I've been just freewheeling this today. And yeah, let me know what you think if you want to talk about something like that. And yeah, just try to be there for some friends that you really feel close to on an emotional level. And have a great Sunday, despite everything. And thanks for watching. Cheers.